The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the iron gates, cameras ready to capture any glimpse of royal life. Among the crowd stood Elon Musk, though few recognized the billionaire entrepreneur in his casual attire. He had arrived in London the previous evening for a surprise business meeting with British government officials about his latest space venture. Musk had always been fascinated by British royalty and their traditions. Growing up in South Africa, he had watched countless documentaries about the Queen and the ceremonial guards. Now, standing just meters away from the famous red-coated sentries, he felt like a child again. The Tesla and SpaceX founder pulled out his phone, hoping to capture a selfie with one of the stoic guards in the background. The guard in question was Thomas Wellington, a 28-year-old soldier from Yorkshire who had served in the Queen's Guard for 5 years. Thomas took immense pride in his duty, viewing each day as an opportunity to represent centuries of British military tradition. His family had a long history of military service, and his grandfather had served in the same regiment during World War II. The red tunic, bearskin hat, and polished boots were not just a uniform to Thomas. They were sacred symbols of honor and duty. As the morning progressed, more tourists gathered, each hoping for that perfect photograph. Musk noticed how the guards remained perfectly still, their faces expressionless despite the constant flash of cameras and excited chatter from visitors. He admired their discipline and wondered what it would be like to maintain such focus while surrounded by chaos. The tech mogul had experienced his own share of public attention, but this was different. These guards were trained to ignore distractions, completely, to become living statues representing the crown. Musk found himself studying Thomas in particular, noting the precise way he held his rifle and the unwavering straightness of his posture. Meanwhile, Thomas was acutely aware of the growing crowd. His training had taught him to observe everything while appearing to see nothing. He noticed the tall man in the casual clothes, who seemed more interested in the guards themselves than in taking typical tourist photos. There was something different about this visitor, though Thomas couldn't quite place what it was. The palace grounds were bustling with activity as staff prepared for the day's official events. Tour guides led groups of excited visitors, explaining the history and significance of the changing of the guard ceremony. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, as it always was when crowds gathered to witness this timeless tradition. Musk checked his watch, realizing he still had time before his scheduled meeting with government officials. The discussion would focus on potential collaborations between SpaceX and the UK Space Agency, but for now he was content to absorb the pageantry and history surrounding him. The contrast between his world of cutting-edge technology and this ancient tradition fascinated him. As he moved closer to the gate, Musk noticed other tourists beginning to recognize him. A few whispered excitedly and pointed in his direction, but he was used to such attention. What he wasn't prepared for was how his growing presence would soon create an unexpected situation that would test the resolve of one very dedicated guard. Thomas continued his duty, aware that something was shifting in the crowd's dynamic. More people seemed to be gathering in one particular area, and he could hear excited murmurs growing louder. His training kicked in automatically. Maintain position, stay alert, but show no reaction to external stimuli. The billionaire entrepreneur found himself drawn to the precision and dedication of the guards. In his own companies, he demanded similar levels of commitment and attention to detail. The guards represented something he respected deeply: unwavering dedication to excellence and duty. He decided he wanted to somehow acknowledge this admiration, though he wasn't quite sure how to do so appropriately. As the crowd continued to grow around Musk, other tourists began taking photos not just of the guards, but of the famous entrepreneur himself. The scene was becoming increasingly chaotic, with people pushing to get better angles and shouting questions at Musk about his latest ventures. The peaceful morning atmosphere was rapidly transforming into something resembling a media scrum. Thomas, felt the change in energy immediately. His peripheral vision caught the increasing movement and activity, though his training prevented him from turning his head to investigate directly. Years of experience had taught him that crowds could become unpredictable, and his primary responsibility was maintaining the dignity and security of his post. The moment that would soon define this encounter was approaching rapidly, though neither Musk nor Thomas could have predicted how their brief interaction would unfold. The stage was set for a clash between two very different worlds, the ancient traditions of the British monarchy and the modern celebrity culture that surrounded one of the world's most famous entrepreneurs. What started as a simple tourist visit was about to become something much more significant, testing the boundaries of royal protocol and highlighting the challenges faced by those sworn to uphold centuries-old traditions in an age of social media and instant fame. The morning sun continued to shine down on Buckingham Palace, but the peaceful scene was about to give way to a moment that would be captured, shared, and debated across the globe. Neither the billionaire nor the guard could have imagined that. Their paths were about to cross in such a public and memorable way, creating a story that would resonate far beyond the palace gates. The crowd around Elon Musk grew larger by the minute as word spread through social media that the famous entrepreneur was at Buckingham Palace. Tourists who had been taking pictures of the guards suddenly shifted their attention to the unexpected. Celebrity sighting. Phones emerged from pockets and bags as people began live streaming and posting updates to their followers. Musk tried to maintain his focus on the ceremonial guards, but the growing attention made it increasingly difficult. He had hoped for a quiet moment to appreciate the tradition and history, but his presence was creating exactly the kind of spectacle he had wanted to avoid. Nevertheless, his fascination with the guards remained strong, and he was particularly drawn to the unwavering composure of Thomas Wellington. Thomas could feel the energy of the crowd changing dramatically. What had started as typical tourist activity was becoming something entirely different. The noise level increased, and he could sense people pressing closer to the gates. His training had prepared him for many situations, but this felt unusual. The crowd's excitement seemed focused on someone specific rather than the guards themselves. A teenager in the crowd recognized Musk first and shouted, "Oh my God, it's Elon Musk!" This announcement rippled through the gathered tourists like wildfire. Within seconds, dozens of people were calling out questions and requests. "Elon, when's the next rocket launch? Can I get a selfie? What do you think about the UK space program?" The billionaire found himself in an impossible situation. He didn't want to ignore the people who were genuinely excited to meet him, but he also didn't want to create chaos at such a historically significant location. He decided to acknowledge the crowd with a friendly wave while trying to redirect their attention back to the guards, who he felt deserved more appreciation than he did. "These guards are incredible," Musk said loudly enough for nearby tourists to hear. "The discipline and dedication they show is really impressive. We should be taking pictures of them, not me." His attempt to deflect attention was well-intentioned, but it only seemed to increase the crowd's excitement. Now they had both a celebrity sighting and a celebrity endorsement of the guards. Thomas heard every word clearly, though his expression remained unchanged. He appreciated the sentiment, but he also recognized that the situation was escalating beyond normal tourist activity. More people were arriving, drawn by the commotion and the promise of seeing someone famous. The area around his post was becoming crowded in a way that could potentially interfere with official palace operations. A group of American tourists began asking Musk detailed questions about his companies while simultaneously trying to get the guards in their background shots. The conversation grew louder as people competed to be heard over the noise of the crowd. Someone shouted a question about Mars colonization, while another person wanted to know about the latest Tesla models. Musk found himself genuinely enjoying the impromptu Q&A session, despite the unusual location. He had always been comfortable, discussing his work and vision for the future, and the enthusiasm of the crowd was infectious. He began explaining some of his latest projects, gesturing animatedly as he spoke about rocket technology and sustainable energy. However, what Musk didn't realize was that his animated discussion was drawing even more attention. Palace security. Personnel had begun monitoring the situation from a distance, noting the size of the crowd and its potential impact on normal operations. The guards themselves were trained to handle tourist attention, but this level of disruption was unusual. Thomas remained perfectly still, but internally, he was assessing the situation carefully. His post was one of several around the palace grounds, and he knew that maintaining order and security was paramount. The crowd pressing closer to the gates wasn't necessarily threatening, but it was definitely beyond the normal scope of tourist behavior. As Musk continued talking with the crowd, more people arrived, having seen posts on social media about his presence at the palace. Some came specifically to see him, while others were simply curious about the commotion. The gathering began to take on the atmosphere of an impromptu press conference rather than a casual tourist visit. A young woman pushed forward with her phone, asking if she could take a selfie with Musk and one of the guards in the background. This request sparked similar requests from others in the crowd, and suddenly everyone wanted the same type of photo. The focus shifted from simple celebrity sighting to wanting to capture the unique combination of modern fame and ancient tradition. Musk agreed to a few photos, thinking it was a harmless way to make people happy while also highlighting the guard's impressive dedication. He positioned himself where Thomas would be visible in the background, not realizing that this action would soon create an unexpected challenge for the disciplined soldier. The crowd surged forward slightly as everyone tried to get the perfect angle for their photos. The noise level increased dramatically as people called out instructions to each other about positioning and lighting. What had started as a peaceful morning at the palace was rapidly becoming a chaotic scene that would soon test the limits of royal protocol. Thomas felt the pressure building around his position, but maintained his composure flawlessly. He had been trained for situations that required absolute stillness and focus, and he drew upon that training now. However, he was also beginning to realize that this situation might require a different kind of response than he had ever encountered before. The stage was set for the confrontation that would soon make headlines around the world. The situation at Buckingham Palace reached a tipping point when Elon Musk, caught up in the excitement of the crowd, made a decision that would change everything. Seeing how much people were enjoying the impromptu gathering and wanting to show his appreciation for British tradition, he decided to approach Thomas Wellington directly. In Musk's mind, this would be a respectful gesture acknowledging the guard's dedication and service. Musk excused himself from the crowd of tourists and walked confidently toward the gate where Thomas stood at attention. The billionaire's intention was simple. He wanted to shake the guard's hand and personally thank him for his service. Having grown up admiring military traditions and having worked with various government agencies through his companies, Musk believed this would be an appropriate gesture of respect. The crowd watched with anticipation as their celebrity hero approached the stoic guard. Phones were raised and cameras focused as everyone prepared to capture what they assumed would be a heartwarming moment between two very different but equally dedicated individuals. The atmosphere was electric with excitement as tourists pushed closer to get the best view of this unprecedented interaction. Thomas saw Musk approaching, but remained in his position, his training taking over completely. Every instinct told him to maintain his post and protocol, regardless of who was approaching. The Queen's Guard had strict rules about interaction with the public, and these rules applied to everyone without exception. No matter how famous or well-intentioned a visitor might be, the guard's duty remained unchanged. As Musk reached the gate, he smiled warmly and extended his hand toward Thomas. "Thank you for your service," he said in a clear voice that carried across the courtyard. "The dedication you show is truly inspiring. I have enormous respect for what you do." The entrepreneur waited expectantly, his hand outstretched, genuinely believing that his gesture would be welcomed and appreciated. but Thomas did not move. Not even a flicker of acknowledgement crossed his face. His eyes remained fixed straight, ahead, looking through Musk as if he didn't exist. The guard's discipline was absolute, his commitment to protocol unwavering. To Thomas, it didn't matter if the person addressing him was a billionaire, a celebrity, or royalty itself. His duty was clear and non-negotiable. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Musk's outstretched hand remained ignored. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their phones still recording what was rapidly becoming an awkward encounter rather than the feel-good moment they had expected. The entrepreneur's smile began to fade as he realized that his gesture was not going to be reciprocated. Musk tried again, this time speaking a bit louder. "I know you probably can't respond, but I just wanted you to know how much I admire your dedication." He moved slightly closer to the gate, hoping that perhaps the guard simply hadn't heard him clearly the first time. The billionaire's genuine enthusiasm for acknowledging the guard's service made his growing disappointment all the more visible to the watching crowd. Thomas remained completely motionless, his breathing steady and controlled. Inside, he felt no animosity toward Musk. In fact, he could appreciate the man's apparent sincerity. However, his training had been thorough and uncompromising. The Queen's Guard did not engage with members of the public during their duty, regardless of circumstances. This wasn't personal. It was professional duty at its highest level. The crowd began to murmur as the awkwardness of the situation became apparent. Some tourists started taking photos of what they now realized was becoming a very different kind of encounter. The excitement in the air shifted to tension as people watched their hero being seemingly dismissed by the immovable guard. Musk's face showed a mixture of confusion and embarrassment as he slowly lowered his outstretched hand. He had expected at least some small acknowledgement, perhaps a slight nod or a brief eye contact. The complete absence of any response felt like a personal rejection, even though he rationally understood that the guard was simply doing his job. A few people in the crowd began to voice their opinions. "Come on, he's just trying to be nice," one tourist called out. Another person shouted, "At least acknowledge him." The crowd's mood was shifting from excitement to frustration as they watched their celebrity being apparently snubbed by the guard. The entrepreneur took a step back from the gate, clearly uncomfortable with how the situation had developed. He had wanted to show respect and appreciation, but instead had created an awkward spectacle that was being recorded by dozens of phones. The morning that had started with such promise was rapidly becoming something he would rather forget. Thomas could feel the growing tension in the crowd but maintained his position perfectly. His training had prepared him for situations where maintaining protocol might seem rude or inflexible to observers, but he understood that consistency in duty was more important than public perception. Every guard who had ever served in this position had faced similar challenges, and each had made the same choice to uphold their duty above all else. The standoff continued for what felt like an eternity to those watching, though it was only a matter of minutes. Musk looked around at the crowd, seeing disappointment and confusion in their faces. He realized that his attempt to honor the guard service had backfired spectacularly, creating exactly the kind of uncomfortable situation he had hoped to avoid. Finally, Musk raised his hands in a gesture of surrender and backed away from the gate. "I understand," he said, though his voice carried a note of disappointment. "Duty comes first." The billionaire's gracious retreat didn't entirely ease the awkwardness of the moment, and the crowd remained divided between those who understood the guard's position and those who felt their hero had been treated rudely. The aftermath of the encounter between Elon Musk and Thomas Wellington was immediate and intense. Within minutes of the awkward exchange, dozens of videos began appearing on social media platforms. The crowd that had witnessed the interaction dispersed slowly, many people continuing to film and comment as they processed what they had just seen. Musk tried to recover his composure, but the embarrassment was clearly visible on his face. He had genuinely wanted to show respect and appreciation, but instead found himself at the center of what was rapidly becoming a viral moment for all the wrong reasons. The entrepreneur, who was used to commanding respect and admiration, suddenly felt very small standing before the unwavering guard. Several tourists approached Musk to offer words of support. "Don't take it personally," said an elderly British gentleman. "The guards aren't allowed to break protocol for anyone, not even the Queen herself when she's not in an official capacity." Others were less understanding, muttering about rudeness and lack of basic courtesy. A young American student who had been recording the entire incident was already uploading her video with the caption, "Elon Musk gets ignored by British Royal Guard." The dramatic nature of the encounter, combined with Musk's celebrity status, made it perfect content for social media. Within the first hour, the video had hundreds of views and was being shared rapidly across platforms. Thomas Wellington remained at his post, outwardly unchanged by the incident. However, internally, he was processing what had just occurred. He felt no satisfaction in having to maintain his stance against someone who seemed genuinely respectful and well-intentioned. The guard understood that his actions might be perceived as rude, but he also knew that making exceptions would undermine the very foundation of his duty. The crowd around the palace gates began to thin out, but the energy remained charged. Some tourists stayed specifically to see if anything else would happen, while others left to share their stories with friends and family. The normal peaceful atmosphere of the morning had been permanently disrupted by the unexpected celebrity encounter. Musk found himself surrounded by a smaller group of supporters who wanted to ensure he didn't feel too badly about the situation. A Canadian family explained how they had learned about royal protocol during their visit, helping the billionaire understand that the guard's behavior wasn't personal. "It's actually a sign of respect for you that he treated you exactly like everyone else," the father explained. Meanwhile, palace security personnel who had been monitoring the situation from a distance began to assess the incident. While nothing dangerous had occurred, the disruption to normal operations and the potential for viral social media content meant that reports would need to be filed and procedures reviewed. The social media response was swift and divided. Some users praised the guard for his unwavering commitment to duty, calling him a perfect example of British discipline and tradition. Comments flooded in supporting Thomas's actions. "This is exactly how a professional should behave," and "respect" to this guard for not breaking protocol for anyone. However, an equally vocal group criticized what they saw as unnecessary rudeness toward someone who was clearly trying to be respectful. "Musk was just trying to say thank you," one popular tweet read. "A simple nod wouldn't have hurt anyone." The debate quickly escalated as people took sides based on their views about protocol versus basic courtesy. Musk himself seemed torn between understanding the guard's position and feeling genuinely hurt by the rejection. He had built his reputation on breaking conventional rules and pushing boundaries, but here he had encountered a boundary that was completely immovable. For someone accustomed to finding solutions to seemingly impossible problems, this absolute inflexibility was both frustrating and oddly impressive. As the morning progressed, news outlets began picking up the story. Entertainment reporters and royal correspondents started analyzing the incident from various angles. Some focused on Musk's embarrassment, while others used the opportunity to explain the historical significance and strict protocols governing the Queen's Guard. The billionaire entrepreneur made a decision to address the situation directly rather than let speculation continue. He pulled out his phone and recorded a brief video message. "I learned something important today about respect, tradition, and duty," he said, standing with the palace visible in the background. "Sometimes showing respect means understanding that certain boundaries exist for good reasons." His gracious response to the situation began to shift public opinion somewhat. Many people appreciated his ability to accept the guard's actions without taking it personally, seeing it as a sign of maturity and understanding. However, the original video of the encounter continued to spread, with the dramatic visual of the rejected handshake proving irresistible to social media users. Thomas remained at his post throughout the morning, though he was aware that his actions were being discussed and debated by people around the world. Other guards at the palace had heard about the incident through their communication networks, and there was a quiet sense of solidarity among them. They all understood that Thomas had done exactly what any of them would have done in the same situation. The incident raised broader questions about the relevance of ancient protocols in modern times. Royal experts found themselves fielding questions from journalists about whether the guards' strict code of conduct needed to be updated for the age of social media and global celebrity culture. As Musk finally prepared to leave for his scheduled government meetings, he took one last look at Thomas Wellington. The guard remained as motionless and focused as he had been throughout the entire encounter. In that moment, the entrepreneur found himself developing a grudging respect for the man's absolute commitment to his duty, even if it had resulted in personal embarrassment. The morning's events had transformed a simple tourist visit into a global talking point, highlighting the clash between modern celebrity culture and centuries-old traditions that refuse to bend for anyone. By midday, the encounter between Elon Musk and Thomas Wellington had exploded across social media platforms worldwide. The hashtag #guardsnubs Musk was trending on Twitter, while Instagram and TikTok were flooded with videos, memes, and reaction posts. The simple gesture of a rejected handshake had become a global phenomenon that captured the attention of millions. News outlets from BBC to CNN began running segments about the incident, interviewing royal protocol experts and social media analysts. The story had all the elements that modern media loved: celebrity drama, cultural clash, and plenty of room for debate. Talk show hosts prepared segments discussing whether the guard had been professional or simply rude. Musk, now in his government, meeting about space industry collaboration, found his phone buzzing constantly with notifications. His social media team was fielding hundreds of interview requests and managing the flood of comments on his various platforms. The billionaire tried to focus on the important business discussions, but the morning's events kept intruding on his thoughts. The government officials he was meeting with had also seen the viral videos. During a brief break in their discussions, the British Space Agency director mentioned the incident with a wry smile. "I hear you've already experienced some of our famous British Reserve," he said, causing nervous laughter around the conference table. Back at Buckingham Palace, Thomas Wellington continued his duty shift, though he was now aware that his actions were being discussed globally. Other guards approached him during shift changes to express their support, understanding completely why he had maintained protocol. His commanding officer later pulled him aside to confirm that he had acted appropriately and that his conduct was exemplary. The viral videos had sparked countless reaction videos from social media influencers and commentary channels. Some defended the guards' professionalism, while others criticized what they saw as outdated and unnecessarily rigid behavior. The debate revealed cultural differences in attitudes toward authority, tradition, and celebrity culture. A particularly popular TikTok video recreated the scene with the caption, "When you try to be nice but protocols say no." The video garnered millions of views and thousands of comments debating whether respect for tradition outweighed basic courtesy. Dance trends and memes began incorporating the rejected handshake gesture, turning the awkward moment into internet culture. Royal family supporters rallied to defend the guards' actions, explaining the historical importance of maintaining protocol without exception. They pointed out that the Queen's Guard had maintained these standards for centuries, through world wars and social changes, and that consistency was what made the institution respected worldwide. Meanwhile, critics argued that a simple acknowledgement wouldn't have undermined anything and that human decency should prevail over rigid rules. They suggested that the guard could have nodded slightly without compromising his duty, making the interaction less awkward for everyone involved. Musk's supporters created counter-narratives praising his gracious handling of the rejection. They highlighted how he had backed away respectfully and later acknowledged the guards' commitment to duty. This response, they argued, showed true leadership and understanding of different cultural values. The incident also sparked broader discussions about wealth, privilege, and expectations. Some commentators noted that Musk's surprise at being ignored revealed how accustomed he had become to special treatment. The guards' refusal to make exceptions, regardless of someone's fame or fortune, was seen by many as refreshingly egalitarian. International. News coverage varied significantly by region. American media generally portrayed the incident as an example of British stuffiness, while British outlets were more likely to praise the guards' adherence to duty. Social media users from different countries brought their own cultural perspectives to the debate, creating a truly global conversation. Thomas Wellington's family members began receiving calls from reporters wanting to interview them about their son's sudden fame. His mother, proud of her son's military service, declined all interview requests, but issued a brief statement through the military's public relations office expressing support for his professionalism. The palace's official social media accounts remained carefully neutral, neither condemning nor praising the guards' actions. Royal communications experts understood that any official comment might be interpreted as taking sides in what had become a polarized debate. Instead, they shared general information about the Queen's Guard and their important ceremonial and security functions. By evening, late-night comedy shows in both America and Britain had prepared segments about the incident. Comedians found rich material in the clash between Silicon Valley innovation culture and British military tradition. The absurdity of a billionaire being ignored by a man in a funny hat provided endless opportunities for humor. Serious news analysis began examining what the incident revealed about modern celebrity culture and social media's power to amplify minor moments into major events. Media scholars noted how quickly a simple interaction had become a global talking point, demonstrating the speed and reach of viral content in the digital age. The encounter had also inadvertently provided a masterclass in crisis communication. Musk's quick and gracious response had helped limit potential damage to his reputation, while the palace's measured silence avoided escalating the situation further. Both approaches demonstrated sophisticated understanding of modern media dynamics. As the day ended, both men continued their duties, Musk in his high-level meetings and Thomas at his ceremonial post. Neither had intended to become part of a global news story, but their brief interaction had touched on fundamental questions about respect, tradition, and the proper balance between protocol and human connection. The incident was far from over, as social media users continued sharing, commenting, and debating throughout the night, ensuring that the story would continue to evolve in unexpected directions. 3 days after the incident, the story had taken on a life of its own that neither Elon Musk nor Thomas Wellington could have anticipated. What started as an awkward encounter had become a cultural phenomenon that revealed deep divisions in how people viewed tradition, celebrity, and respect in the modern world. Musk, now back in California, held a press conference primarily focused on SpaceX's latest achievements. However, the first several questions from reporters were about the London incident. The billionaire handled them with characteristic directness, explaining that he had learned valuable lessons about cultural boundaries and the importance of understanding different perspectives on duty and service. "I have even more respect for that guard now," Musk told the assembled media. His commitment to his principles, even when it might seem rude to outsiders, shows the kind of unwavering dedication we need more of in the world. This statement helped shift some public opinion in favor of both men, portraying the incident as a learning experience rather than a clash of egos. Thomas Wellington had returned to his regular rotation schedule, but his life had changed dramatically. The military had assigned a public relations officer to handle the hundreds of interview requests and media inquiries. The guard himself remained focused on his duties, though he was touched by the overwhelming support from fellow service members around the world. The viral videos had reached far beyond entertainment value, becoming teaching tools in military, academies, and business schools. Leadership instructors used the incident to discuss the importance of maintaining principles under pressure, while communications professors analyzed how different responses to the same event could shape public perception. Social media continued to generate content around the encounter, but the tone had begun to shift. Initial mockery and outrage gave way to more thoughtful discussions about the role of ceremony and tradition in modern society. Many users began sharing stories of their own encounters with military personnel and ceremonial guards, creating a broader conversation about respect and duty. The British Army quietly celebrated the positive attention the incident had brought to their ceremonial duties. Recruitment offices reported increased inquiries from young people interested in joining the Queen's Guard, inspired by Thomas's example of unwavering professionalism under pressure. The incident had inadvertently become one of their most effective recruitment tools in years. International royal protocol experts found themselves in high demand as news outlets sought to explain the historical context behind the Guard's behavior. They described centuries of tradition that had shaped the role, explaining how consistency in protocol was essential to maintaining the dignity and security of royal ceremonies. The encounter had also sparked academic interest, with sociology, professors analyzing how the incident reflected broader cultural tensions between American and British values. The clash between Musk's informal, boundary-pushing approach and the Guard's formal adherence to protocol became a case study in cross-cultural communication. Late-night television continued mining the incident for humor, but even the comedy had evolved. Initial jokes mocking either man gave way to more sophisticated humor about cultural differences and the absurdity of internet fame. The incident had become a touchstone for discussions about how quickly modern life could turn ordinary. Moments into global events, both men received unexpected support from surprising sources. Military veterans praised Musk for his gracious response to rejection, while tech industry leaders expressed admiration for the Guard's uncompromising commitment to his principles. The incident had somehow managed to create respect for both perspectives, rather than forcing people to choose sides. The palace eventually issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging the global interest in the incident while reaffirming their support for the professional conduct of all ceremonial guards. They used the opportunity to educate the public about the important security and ceremonial functions performed by the Queen's Guard throughout the year. Thomas received a commendation from his commanding officer for his exemplary conduct under unusual circumstances. The recognition noted not only his adherence to protocol, but also his grace under intense public scrutiny. His family expressed pride in how he had represented British military values on the world stage. Musk incorporated lessons from the incident into his leadership philosophy, often referencing it in speeches about the importance of understanding and respecting different cultural approaches to duty and service. The encounter had provided him with a powerful example of principled behavior that resonated with audiences worldwide. The incident also had lasting effects on tourism at Buckingham Palace. Visitor numbers increased significantly as people hoped. To witness similar interactions or simply to see the famous guard post where the encounter had taken place, tour guides began including the story in their historical narratives about the palace and its guardians. As weeks passed, the immediate viral energy around the incident faded, but its impact continued. The encounter had become a modern parable about respect, duty, and the challenges of navigating cultural differences in an interconnected world. Both men had emerged from the experience with enhanced reputations, having demonstrated different but equally admirable qualities under pressure. The story entered internet folklore, joining the ranks of viral moments that capture something essential about human nature and modern society. Years later, people would still reference the time Elon Musk was snubbed by a royal guard as an example of how unexpected encounters can reveal profound truths about character and values. Thomas Wellington returned to his quiet life as a ceremonial guard, though he would forever be remembered as the soldier who refused to compromise his principles for anyone. Elon Musk continued his ambitious projects to revolutionize transportation and space exploration, carrying with him a deeper appreciation for traditions that had endured far longer than any technology. Their brief encounter had taught millions of people valuable lessons about respect, duty, and the unexpected ways that ordinary moments can become extraordinary stories.